Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my channel. Today in this video we are going to make the hotel key from Hazbin Hotel. The first thing that we're going to do is take a large piece of parchment paper and we're going to trace it onto the parchment paper so that way this blueprint of the key can be our guide throughout this build. And once it's all traced out, we're going to take our scissors and cut out the image from the parchment paper. After the key image is finally cut out, we go to the next step by choosing the best 3 of large popsicle sticks for this build. After I measure where the center is going to be, I now go to my project of knife sets and choose which of the blades is going to be helpful, and once I did, I then go back to the measurements and line up the center of where I need to cut. After drawing the center, I now go and start cutting the very middle of the large popsicle sticks. Each one has to do at least 3 or 4 cuts before the popsicle sticks starts to give out in the center for me to split them into 2. After the first one, I now do it with the other 2. After that, I now go to each one and get rid of both top and bottom pieces of the popsicle sticks. I take my blade once again and start by cutting it out until they're all nice and perfect. The reason these pieces are like this is because they'll have a reason behind it. So the first thing we're going to do is measure how long the key is going to be and start by cutting it out. After they're all cut, they're going to be put together so the bottom part and the top part will have an opening for both parts of the key. And after that, we're going to sand each one of them down so a nice surface can be around it. I now take Elmore's glue because we're going to put all of it together because this piece will be the very center and the core of the key. I took some objects that has some weight so that way it can help make sure that all 3 of these pieces stay together. I gave it an extra 30 minutes to make sure everything was dried and perfect, and after it's all set together, I can now start sanding it with the sandpaper. After a while of making sure all 4 sides are sanded down, I make sure that all sides are nice and smooth. And then I take my blade once again and I start by making this object from a square shape to a round shape. After the carving is done, I now use my sandpaper to start sanding it. And for the parts that weren't sanding down fully, I use my little filer to start filing it down. After the filing was done, I now go back by using the sandpaper once again, and I was also making sure while sanding down it all was nice and rounded and smooth, and I used a couple of techniques to make sure that the shape of it stays in place until the core of the piece of the center of the key looks like this. The next part of the key that we're going to do is called the head key, or the key head, or in other words, the bit. I used another large popsicle stick to trace to the design and then by cutting it out. After cutting the piece of the key bit, I now go and start carving the key bit into shape. After carving the bit, I now go to the sandpaper and start making each side of the bit nice and smooth, and I did the same thing again with the other piece to put together. And then I have to put in the ward parts for the key so it has that key bit effect. After the key bit is done, I now take both the key bit and the stem and start putting it together until it looks like this. The last part for the key is the ward, and instead of using popsicle sticks, we're going to use our oven baked clay for this build. I start by tracing out the design of the ward part for the key and start cutting it out. After cutting out the piece of clay with the shape of the ward, I now take the image and start placing it on top of the stem for the key. And I also used a coin of a dime to make this circle shape and carved in a heart for the center of it. And after everything is now put together, we preheat the oven to 250 and place it in the oven for a time of 15 minutes. After the 15 minutes were done, the key turned out great, but the problem was the bow part where the shape of the wings are was way too thin. So I'm going to fix this real quick by cutting out 2 pieces of clay shaped bows to be on the bottom part and the top part. After cutting the first part, which is going to be the bottom part of the bow key, I now go to the other side of the key by doing the top part. For this top part for the bow key, I'm just going to take the coin once again and start pressing it down at the very center. I took the parchment paper out once again, and I'm going to use the dime one more time to pressure down even more, so that way I can see the circle shape in the very center. Then I take my blade to carve out the circle, so the shape of the ward key looks like this. I then now take my set of carving tools to help with this build by making sure that this top part piece of the bow key is in place, and I use my fingers now to make everything nice and smooth on all sides. Once I checked all parts of the key, including the part of the bow key, I now put it back in the oven for the same temperature and time for 15 minutes. After banging in the oven for the final time, I now take my blade tool again, but this time with a different blade with a sharper edge to it. And I went around on each side of the key, make sure all the materials of the surface is gone, and make sure everything on all sides, including the top, is nice and smooth. After carving all sides of the key, I now go to the next step by taking extra clay and putting it where the key bit is, so that way it has that nice effect for the key. The last piece to put on this key is this design that's on the stem. I'm also using a reference photo from the Hazbin Hotel logo. Next step, we're going to take our black acrylic paint to paint the entire thing black. By painting this key black, it will take at least 3 coats of paint to do it. The next color paint that we're going to use is just regular red, and I use the red to paint around the heart that's the very center of the key. While the red paint is drying, I am now going to the next step by taking clear nail gloss to shine the whole thing to give it that effect, and I also do the same clear nail gloss for the heart. And after many hours, the hotel key from Hazbin Hotel is finally complete.